Any questions?
Hi, Francis. It's interesting, I noticed that writing questions.
Is your... Yes, go ahead.
I noticed that writing these questions down, it seems like we can express them a little clearer than just kind of coming up with them sometimes, I don't know. But my question is that if I'm interested in sharing this knowledge with others, how do I know that this body-mind is ready so that I'm not misleading?
What?
Check, check.
You don't have audio? It's okay.
Yeah, check.
You sure? Because I checked it before. Speak.
Check. Test, test. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I'm interested in sharing this knowledge, this knowing with others, how do I know that I'm not misleading others on their path to truth, right? Like, how do I have almost confidence of when someone asks me some question about this knowing that I'm already consciousness, so I'm answering them from the
What
point
is very important is to be honest. And being honest means, for instance, when we ask, if we answer a question, to take your example, we can answer a question from 3 different vantage points. One is from hearsay, meaning from the experience of others. 2 is from our past experiences, our own experiences, but from the past. 3, from our current experience, right now, in the moment itself. So this understanding here is best shared from our current experience in the now. And but ultimately, answering question is only a very small part of the equation. Because we only can share what we have, what we experience. So if we are miserable, we cannot share happiness. And this business of the truth is about sharing happiness and peace. So if you are happy, 99% of the time you can share your happiness 99% of the time. No matter what you do or don't do. It shares itself. The worse if you believe to be happy and if you are in fact miserable. Because you believe that you are sharing happiness, in fact you are sharing your own misery. So that's
the evidence, I guess.
all
Thank you.
all I can say.
This is a doubt that I wanted to ask you about. Just the difficulty of witnessing, or the ease of witnessing. When the poop hits the fan, I'm so under it, I can't come up and witness. Or when I'm so hypnotized by my greed for experience. There are different times when I just can't, the witness is, that experience doesn't happen. And it happens in critical times sometimes when I really need it, when I want it. And it's so daunting that I wonder what hope is there for me to have self-realization this lifetime. Because despite how much I want it and how many years I've sought it, those critical times I find I'm unconscious. And if I can't experience in those critical times the witness, I don't want to be just an armchair philosopher or armchair seeker. It's in the thick of things that I feel I need to be able to be there, but I go unconscious. And so the thought comes up, am I wasting my time? Is this just folly? Like the leader of the free world said he'd go in and save all those people even if he didn't have a gun. When it's really, the test, is that true? No. And same thing for me. Is it true that I can really be there in truth during those critical times? And I'm frightened that I'm not up to the task. The very notion that as a witness we are switched on and switched off is mistaken. The witness, the perceiver, is always present, otherwise it wouldn't be perception. So first we have to see that clearly, otherwise, if we believe that witnessing goes on and off, we are on a shaky ground. Now, there is some things that goes on and off, which is the belief that we are a limited witness.
The belief that we are a limited witness. Now, we have to envision, how does a belief maintain itself? Once we have adopted a belief, we don't need to keep it in mind in order to hold it to be true. For instance, as children, at some point we adopted the belief in the existence of Santa Claus. And we didn't need to constantly think about Santa Claus to keep holding this belief to be true, right? The belief, once we have stamped it with the truth stamp, remains stamped until we unstamp it, so to speak, right? So, here, that which goes on and off is the belief that we are a limited consciousness. The moment we deem it to be true, this belief has been switched on. Now, this belief, in turn, the problem is as we switch it on, the belief seems cute. And we see nothing wrong with it. Up until, after some times, the byproducts, the byproduct of this belief begins to show up, and the byproduct is misery. And then we say, oh, I'm out of witnessing. You see, I'm not out of witnessing. I am enjoying walking on misery lane. But I've been walking on misery lane from some time, but as I took this turn, into this street, I was happy to explore this street. You see? Now, what can I do? As long as I enjoy being there, meaning as long as I enjoy the idea of being a separate consciousness, I keep walking on misery lane. The moment I question this belief I have, immediately I'm teleported out of misery lane. Immediately. But in most cases, I don't want to. So, walking on misery lane, I simply enjoy my freedom. We have to understand that, because then the question of witnessing or not witnessing is a wrong description of what's going on. The correct description of what is going on is, am I miserable or not? Because who cares? Let's assume I am not witnessing. And I am happy. So what? Who cares about not witnessing? You see? Or let's assume I am witnessing, but I am miserable. So the issue is not about witnessing versus not witnessing. It's about happying without versus misering. These are not good English words, right? It's happying versus misering. That's the real issue. The rest is irrelevant.
But I can be happying
and
in a limited state of consciousness and be content.
Who cares? Yes. Be happying in a limited state of consciousness. Be happying in having different political opinions. Be happying. Who cares? Provided you are happying.
Well, some of that happying is like a slingshot.
If your goal in life is not to be happy, you came to the wrong place. You see, if your goal in life is to, I don't know what, it's for you to state what the goal is, if it is something else than being happy. You see, so then what we have to look at is the origin of misery, and to see that misery is a psychological suffering, is always a self-inflicted wound. And the goal is not some weird realization or some weird thing that it's, you know, I wouldn't, you know, it's happiness, stupid. You see, it's not the economy. It's happiness. So if I am unhappy, it's not that I am not witnessing, because I'm always witnessing. It's rather than at that moment I am again infatuated with the belief to be a human being, a body-mind, to being a human structure. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote a little essay, and he called it Existentialism is a Humanism. He was right. That's why he was such a miserable guy. What we call usually humanism is something else, because what we call human qualities have in fact nothing to do with the human body, but they have to do with our intelligence of our universal nature. Qualities such as intelligence, compassion, happiness, love of beauty. These we see that in our culture as attribute of a human body. They are not. The human body is, moved by instincts of survival of the individual and of the species, and natural egoism goes with that. And all of that is normal. It's part of nature, right? But there is nothing transcendental about the human body. It is not better. I mean, why would a living organism be better than a cow? At least cows are more innocent than men. You see? I'm not in favor of the death penalty. I'm against it. But if I had to choose between killing a murderer and a bad guy and a cow, the cow is innocent, has nice eyes. You see, so what I'm saying here is politically extremely incorrect. You see what I mean? Extremely incorrect. Because we have this sense that man is superior, that the human race is superior. But we have known that in history. We have had tribalism, we have had racism, and that is speciesism. You know, the human species is superior. As a result, we are entitled to kill the other species, to eat them, to... And that is, I mean, when I say that, I'm very incorrect politically. You see, that's not, these are not things to be said. Like, you know, animals don't have a consciousness. There was a period when also when the races who were not white didn't have a soul. Not that far ago, you know. In a certain sense, it's the same business. So what we call usually the human qualities, they are not human. You know, this love for freedom, this love for truth, this love for beauty. It is not inherent in the human race. It's beyond.
Francis, so when I'm conscious knowingly, this is my time that I can inquiry and have more possibilities.
No, you're conscious knowingly when you're happy, free, without worries. Then you may investigate, or you may just have a beer.
Yes. And the other time that I'm conscious unknowingly, I'm running by subconscious, by my programs, by my...
When you are conscious unknowingly is when you are not happy. In other words, when you have some worry, when you have something missing in the background. You don't necessarily know what it is, but you don't feel complete, you don't feel satisfied.
So in this case, when you are free, that means when you are conscious and knowingly, or subconsciousness is the same.
When you are what?
Free, you just clean all your beliefs.
When you are happy without cause, and if you ask yourself the question, would I wish it to be different? And if the answer is no, coming from your own counsel, from your own, you know, from the depths of your being, it means you are knowingly consciousness.
So will come time there is not knowingly and unknowingly become the same? To be happy?
No, you cannot be happy and miserable at the same time. To be knowingly consciousness, it simply means to be happy without cause. Because when we are happy with a cause, this happiness is not real happiness, because the cause of our happiness is impermanent, and therefore we know that this happiness is threatened, because it is dependent upon its cause, which is impermanent, which makes this happiness automatically impermanent. And an impermanent happiness has within itself the seed of misery. It is very revelatory to rephrase, in a sense, this whole business about enlightenment realization in terms of happiness, you see. Just as it is very revelatory to rephrase all the business about consciousness in terms of reality. And just happiness meets peace, and peace meets happiness in this absence of lack, absence of worries, absence of lack. And because it is causeless, it can never be removed through the disappearance of its cause. Its cause is reality itself, not an object appearing within reality or an event. And reality is that which never disappears and that which has never appeared. So when our happiness is grounded in reality instead in events or objects, then it becomes something else. It becomes peace.
When you say grounded, what does mean grounded?
Means it has its origin in, it comes from, it originates from reality. If the happiness originates from something which is impermanent, it is not real happiness. Because it has, as I said, within itself already misery. If you are madly in love with this partner, the love of your life, and he or she tells you, you know, we are going to live for 1 year together. But then I am from a different planet, I have to go back home. Right? I mean, this 1 year will be hell. Because the more in love you are, and the more beautiful it is, the more you think of the impermanence of this happiness. Right? It is so. It is true of any happiness which is based on an object or an event because of the impermanence of it. The more powerful this happiness seems to be, the more powerful the projection of its ending, or the more powerful the misery created by the anticipation of its ending.
But Francis, this grounded of happiness exists all the time. It's question of knowingly or not knowingly.
It's a question of knowing what you are. Meaning of knowing your own reality. Knowing what you are, what you really are, meaning knowing your own reality. Because that which we love the most is ourselves. There is human egoism and there is holy egoism. Human egoism is the love for a human object, a human body-mind. Holy egoism is the love for our true ego, for our true self. It is absolutely natural for the self to love itself.
And when it's grounded, it changes the memory and the mind becomes something more...
Everything else becomes irrelevant. Everything else doesn't have to change. All it has to do is to become irrelevant. Especially irrelevant in terms of happiness. So then, the attachment to objects kind of goes away. I mean, if the objects are there, if the events are there, that's fine, it's celebration, but in the religions, there was this partial understanding of the vanity of this world. Vanity, meaning everything we can acquire in this world, is kind of useless because at some point we have to leave it. Right? We have to leave it. It's impermanent. So there is this understanding of the impermanence. There was a period even in the art, in the fine art, they would paint still lives, you know, with beautiful flowers, etc. But they would put also a human skull in the picture to make it spiritual. And the message was, you know, the flower is very beautiful, yes, but you're going to die. And that's going to be the end of it. You know? So, and the message, the subliminal message was, don't enjoy this world because it is impermanent. Invest in the afterlife. Goes to the church, goes to the Pope, give him your money. Invest where you know, it's a sales pitch, you know. Invest where your money will be in the safe place, in the Vatican. And that there was an element of truth in this, which is the vanity of and the impermanence of objects. The mistake of it is that this separate entity would keep, you know, surviving the body, and then in the afterlife would reap the benefits of its activity during this life by going through different types of Motel 6 or 5-star hotel, or depending on the past karma. When we understand the universality of our true nature, its unshakability, then that removes this sense of impending doom. And then it makes this world a place for celebration, and this body an instrument for celebration, for as long as the instrument lasts. So it's different. It's not that we have to go away from the world that we have said. No, world, I don't want you. You're bad. Human body, you are dirty. You know. No. All of that is divine energies. All of that is.
Thank you.
I'm curious regarding animals and humans, that discussion. I can see that the transcendent is independent of the body, or that experience is just is experience. I've heard some sages say that, you know, this is a great opportunity to go to the ultimate, being a human. And this point of perception is human, and we seem to be humans talking about happiness and so forth. And as far as I know, animals don't think about mathematics or, you know, transcendent realities or universals. I mean, maybe they do. I don't see any evidence of complex languages. I'm just wondering, it doesn't seem like it's random.
Yeah, but, you know, human beings have different IQs. So does it mean that those who have, I've been told that human flesh is very delicious, so that those who have a small IQ should be slaughtered and eaten?
I'm not saying that the IQ is higher. I'm saying here we are, humans. Is there something? Why do sages think there's something special about this opportunity of being human?
You know?
I mean,
the French philosopher Pascal has said that the man is in halfway between the beast and the angel. But he adds also the one who wants to pretend to be an angel becomes a beast. But I have no quarrel to admit that apparently human beings have different specific talents.
Types?
Talents, skills. We don't run as fast as a cheetah. We don't have the power of an elephant. It depends how you judge. We don't have the sexual performance of rabbits.
Thank God for that. There'd be too many humans.
The humping abilities. But I don't see what your problem is.
I'm curious because it seems if there is some genuine difference or specialness about humans with regard to self-realization or like supposedly we go through this. You're talking about animals having an ego and it's natural, and I can see that, how that plays out. But then going beyond that,
I think this type of question is purely intellectual. In other words, we can debate forever. Do animals have a soul or not? Can animals get realized or not? As I've said, I used to have a dog who was realized, but because someone asked me the question once, Ramana Maharshi said that his cow was realized, and I don't know, Maharaj says that animals cannot achieve realization. So which one is right? And, is Ramana Maharshi right or is Maharaj right? So I answer this question by saying, well, I had a dog who was realized, but I'm quite certain if I had asked him the question, he would answer it, which is a sign of wisdom.
All right, so it's irrelevant
I think so.
as far as experience.
It's like debating whether there are human beings in a very distant planet which is out of our light cone, meaning we'll never know, because they can never have send us a message from there or have an influence on us in any way. So who cares? You see?
Yeah, I saw it as related to the question of why am I here in this body? You know, but
that the answer is easy. You are not in this body is in you.
thank you.
Okay. Tom asks, as a path or satsang, I cannot figure out what or where the incessant questions and answers lead, but I enjoy listening nevertheless. I think that's a good attitude. If you like it, as I often say, why not do it? Anna. Okay. I have to translate that because it's in French. I am a presence. God is a presence that manifests as the universe. The universe is Maya, God's magic. Mighty, frightening, wonderful, mysterious. The presence I am talks, dances, and makes love with the universal presence. Like a butterfly that flies towards a candle flame and will burn in it, becoming light itself. I'm not him, but at the same time, I cannot not be him, the ground of all existence. God is both he and me, presence and manifestation, within and without, limit between the within and the without. I know he is in me, but I don't have the experience of being he. The intellect is Advaita, but the heart is Bhakti. God is a pure being, but also a person. Its infinite intelligence frightens me like it did to Pascal. Well, what I remember from Pascal, say something like the depths of these infinite spaces. Voilà, le silence éternel de ces espaces infinis m'effraie. Yeah, the eternal silence of this infinite space frightens me. I am his daughter, but I'm not him, while being he at the same time, because I can be outside him. I would like to know your opinion. Well, as universal presence, you are also this body. So as universal presence, it's okay to say, I am this body. Provided you don't forget that you are universal presence and that you are also this world. It's okay to express the truth in two different ways. One way is somehow the way you are expressing it by saying, I am this body, but the consciousness in me, that which is hearing these words, is God. It's okay. Because, and by the way, this body which I am is part of God. It's not separate from God, because God is a substance, is the being in which this body moves. It's okay. The problem would be only if you believe this consciousness, which is hearing these words, not to be God's consciousness. And then that there would be two consciousnesses, a small perceiver and a universal perceiver. But as long as you don't lose sight of this understanding, of this experience, that this consciousness is a divine spark in you, that this consciousness, hearing these words, is God's consciousness. Not a different one, not a smaller replica, not an image of it. Because a consciousness that is an image cannot perceive. It is then the very pretentious to claim that a separate consciousness has the power to perceive. It's not humility, it's false humility. Only God has the power to perceive. It is the Lucifer, the word Lucifer means the carrier of the light. And the light is the light of intelligence, the light of consciousness. So the myth is that we are the carrier, we are all Lucifers, we are all carriers of the light. And then there is a fall of Lucifer when he sees himself as carrying a light which is independent from God. So this, in what you have said, there is one sentence that is problematic for me. Is when you say the presence I am enters into a dialogue and dances and makes love with the universal presence. That is problematic. The presence I am is universal. The light in me is universal. Jesus said, was calling his disciples and himself the children of the light. Not the carriers of the light, but the children, because it expresses also. So you can very well call yourself a child of the light, provided you know that the light is this presence of you that perceives, that understands, and that loves. Dory. The fundamental defect of the female character is the lack of a sense of justice. This originates first and foremost in their want of rationality and capacity for reflection. But it is strengthened by the fact that I can see some identification here. I can see some ignorance. But it is strengthened by the fact that, as the weaker sex, they are driven to rely not on force but on cunning. Hence, their instinctive, you may disagree, it's fine. I can see that more ignorance popping up here, more identification. Why can't you listen to bullshit without getting moved by it? For as nature has equipped the lion with claws and teeth, the elephant with tucks, the wild boar with fangs, the bull with horns, and the cuttlefish with wings, so it has equipped women with the power of dissimulation. As her means of attack and defense. Well, I don't know. I don't know whether I'm going to keep reading this bullshit some more. Nothing happens by chance, right? I'm not responsible. Came through the mail. That was heavy. When I tease, it's just like children teasing each other, on the playground. But that was really bad. Not the same. Chris. I wrote to you in the new year of a powerful, wonderful, and slightly terrifying glimpse of consciousness that occurred at our local park. Can you please speak of such glimpses and their aftermath? You have previously mentioned a nice surprise if you are open to the possibility. Yeah, I think what I said is that the glimpses, like a tree, have to be judged by the fruit they bear. A powerful glimpse may not be a revolutionary glimpse, and a glimpse which is apparently tiny and inconsequential may have the most powerful consequences. So the question is, if you want to evaluate a glimpse, is not the majesty or the power or the strength it seemed to have in the moment itself, but to ask yourself the question, what did this glimpse reveal that is always true? And then, what are the implications of this revelation? Are the implications small, tiny, or important? You see? So start asking yourself the question, what was revealed by the glimpse? And then what does that imply? Fela. Her mother passed away. She says, could you please talk about death in the big picture? I remember you saying something like nothing of significance really happens, but that is simply like one of the multitude of consciousness perception apparatuses or broadcast receivers clicking off and going silent. That makes complete sense to me in terms of bodies switching off like old machines when they fall apart and become useless. However, this was and still is a very poignant experience, filling me with love and awe, not just like regular uncaused happiness. Perhaps because in this moment we realize that the person with whom we had experienced love, these moments of oneness, is not and never was the body that has become silent. The life was not the life of the body. The body was the tool used by life, but the life was not the body. The body was not neither the cause nor the support of life. life was the cause and the support of the body. When life withdrew its support, the body became silent. So the person we loved, remains where it has always been, which is in our heart. Arsha, oh no, not a long question like that. So there are 3 questions. Okay. First question is on realms. As you describe it using the analogy in the Gospel that my father has many rooms in his house, sounds quite perfect to me. That there are infinite realms and each having a unique and sometimes a common set of experience, very often undescribable, but nevertheless very there. I had a question relating to their experience that since consciousness envelopes all of these realms and itself is present unfailingly always, so does this also mean that these realms are right now, right there, directly experienceable always as per their availability? In my experience, I often feel mostly intuitively that there are really infinite facets, and we tend to move around in them, and often many unnameable thoughts and feelings, mostly intuitive, happen to be visiting and living experience. I just wanted to verify it with you as to this fact that consciousness has access to all realms, choicelessly, and that the plausibility of their experience in a very normal and usual fashion like any other experience. Well, no. Definitely consciousness has access to these realms and creates them, but not human mind. So when you use the word consciousness, I'm afraid there is a little bit of a connotation of human mind. So the answer is the human mind has only access to its usual realm with a few exceptions that usually don't last. Because the mind is not really equipped for that. So sometimes the mind has inkling of other realms. The realm of ideas. The realm of beauty. But when I envision other realms and an infinity of realms, most of those are no business for the human mind. I say that just because we don't want to limit the infinity of God. For instance, we were talking earlier on, about not putting man at the center of creation. It's like this Earth, this planet Earth. When you look at these infinite spaces of which Pascal was talking, I mean, it's mind-boggling. We are really a tiny, tiny speck of dust in this infinite universe. Already in this solar system we are small, but the sun itself in our galaxy is very small. And our galaxy itself in this universe is like a speck of dust. And then possibly this universe is like a small bubble in a huge bottle of divine champagne. And then there might be other universes in different dimensions that the human mind is totally unable to comprehend. Different dimension, for instance, dimension in which there is no time. And yeah, I use as an example of a timeless realm, a realm to which we have sometimes access. The realms of mathematical ideas, as an example. There is no movement there. The number pi doesn't evolve in time. So that's an example of a timeless realm. But there is still, in this realm, there are still specificities, forms, if you will. The number pi is not the number 1, it's not the number e, it's not the number 3, it's different. So it has a very clear specificity. But in this realm, there is no time. And there might be realms with different dimensions. We cannot limit the infinite possibilities of reality. That's my whole point. My point is not to explore other realms. I mean, we have plenty of stuff with this realm without, trying to go into. Second question is on absolute will. I've heard you just once over the satsang and YouTube recordings mentioning about the will. You have described an experience in context of Kashmiri Shaivism where, while focusing on intervals, there is this experience of this absolute will, the will of consciousness. It felt quite true in experience, but I couldn't understand anything more following that and wanted to hear you on this aspect of consciousness. The division of tattvas as described in Kashmiri Shaivism as will, knowledge, and action as the primary divisions on top, and also a hierarchy in the same order. So I wanted to know more on the will of Icha Shakti. In experience in a very small corner, it feels as if nothing supersedes this will, and it is absolute. This will is the will of freedom. It is the that which reveals to us the revelation that we will everything that happens. And in other words, it's the same as the revelation that everything that happens originates from the freedom of consciousness. That the sense of will, of this will, is identical with the experience of our freedom. Of our freedom to. Because there are two freedoms. There is freedom from and freedom to. Freedom to create and freedom from being affected by anything. So the freedom to reveals itself as the divine will. The freedom from reveals itself as happiness, or as presence, or as peace. In other words, in the presence of objects, the peace is not affected by the events, by the objects. So the peace is free. Our true nature is free from the appearances. And my last question is on ignorance. As to progressively over the years, the lifting of the veil of ignorance has been understood in experience through gradually simplifying examples. Something like, earlier the story of the rope being understood as a snake conveyed that impact, while prior to that, it felt something more eventful, like a story would lay an impact. Post the rope story, the mention that I am the perceiver has the same enlightening taste as any of the stories I had had. And the more surprising thing is this was heard so many times earlier, that I am the perceiver, but it never had the same taste as it has now, as if the same me was so somewhere else while hearing that. It becomes unbelievable sometimes that how it wasn't understood, even though it had been just here the whole time. As if I, the same I, is still the I, but more of itself somehow, and how ignorant it all was. So more than a question, I just wanted to hear you say something on this aspect, that how nothing ever happens, yet everything happens. I feel completely the same, the one who had those stories and facts then, and completely new, as into the new revelation the same fact, as simply as I am the perceiver brings. Yes, Harsha, but the real you is the new you. The real you is the eternally new you. A comment, kind of a symbolic comment about this thing that we have been around the truth so many times. We have heard the same thing by the teacher, and it didn't touch us up until somehow we were ready for it, and all of a sudden we get it, and then it takes a new importance. My college, the colleges I went to, 2 different colleges first in Paris, were in the Latin Quarter. So I spent 4 years in this part of Paris, in this small 5th arrondissement. So 4 years, I knew all the tiniest street, and I knew everything that was in the street, like a cat. When you move into a new house, after 1 week or less, the cat has explored all the nooks and crannies of the house. So I knew everything. And there was a street called la Rue de la Huchette, where I would walk quite often because it was a nightclub, and I would go there to this nightclub. Several years later, now I am a truth lover, and I am with this friend, and we are walking in Paris, and he stops by at this library, a bookstore, who was a metaphysical bookstore but dedicated to alchemy. And as I go into this store, I say, I've never noticed the presence of this store. I was walking in front of it. I thought I knew there was this theater, there was a nightclub, there was this restaurant, the theater, the Cabaret de la Huchette. There was, for those who know, there was, but this metaphysical, this very tiny, sweet little bookstore, and that was the point of the meeting point in Paris for the alchemists. And the truth remains hidden for those who are not ready for it. I wasn't ready when I was a student there. So that's the beauty of it. Karuna. I have studied Kashmir Shaivism and been in the presence of wonderful teachers, including Paul Muller-Ortega, Ramdas, Amar, Radhanath Swami, and Sri Vasudeva. Have also taught within the non-dual tradition for 11 years. Oh. She says, I've been averse to further teaching since visiting an ashram about 11 months ago. And she says, I wish to continue studies with you. You are most welcome to our group of friends. They are only friends here. Tom, the whole ball of wax seems to be in not identifying with thoughts, feelings, and sensations, and to identify with awareness, to the point of being able to not be swayed by the conditioning that the former identification brings. Is it simple inquiry, or is grace involved in a bigger way? Well, the fact that you are open to investigating is grace already. So don't separate them. Ultimately, grace is not something which is bestowed upon you by another. You are the dispenser of grace. And you are also the beneficiary of it. Takashi. I'm wondering whether I attend the retreat in June from Japan or not. What is the difference between being in a retreat and watching the live video of it? You would have to attend a retreat to know the difference. Oh, Tom, one more question. So I have more questions, Tom. I will answer this question next time. I mark it as unread. Wouter. After enlightenment, it is said that there is a release of energies in the body, surely because one is not identified and attached to the body anymore. However, one does not lose the body, so there must be some connection between consciousness and the body-mind. Also, many teachers advise to go within. I suppose this means within the body. is there then a center in the body where consciousness is to be found? Where and how are body and consciousness connected? Okay, I'm going to answer the last question, where and how are the body and consciousness connected? The body appears in consciousness. That's a connection. The body appears in consciousness. Consciousness doesn't appear in the body. So, then, is there then a center in the body where consciousness is to be found? That question was just answered, because if consciousness doesn't appear in the body, there is not a center in the body where consciousness is to be found. Then I go back. Many teachers advise to go within. I suppose this means within the body, question mark. I don't know what other teachers advise but my advice is not to go within the body, not to investigate the body, but to investigate consciousness. And to investigate, and by consciousness, and I mean that whatever that is, which is hearing these words in this moment. And that which, whatever that is, which is hearing these words in this moment, is also that which perceives the body. We don't have two consciousnesses or two identities, one to hear the words, another one to perceive the body. It is the same I which hears the words and perceives the body. So to go within for me means to investigate what we can know about this consciousness, and also what we don't know about it, and what we believe we know about it, which is not proven. So let's start with that. We believe often that this consciousness is dependent upon the body for its very existence. What's the evidence? Try to find out. We believe also that this consciousness is limited, for instance, that it had a beginning in time. What's the evidence? Try to find out. We believe also that this consciousness is like a thought. Ask yourself the question, do thoughts think? So, the investigation about consciousness is the one I recommend. And that is what I would call to go within, if you want to use this a little this vocabulary, this terminology. My advice is more precise than that. Now, also, after enlightenment, it is said that there is a release of energy in the body. We have to make a distinction between enlightenment and self-realization. Enlightenment is the revelation that consciousness is universal. And self-realization, I would say, to be, as a result of that, to be free and happy most of the time. So there is a process from the glimpse of truth to being established in peace. Andre, my questions. When something happens in life that is somehow shocking or even traumatizing, or when something feels overwhelming, it seems more difficult to simply abide as awareness and to see that this experience is known and nothing more. Yes, but the more you go back to this knowing what you are, the less will you be shaken by events. The events are yoga exercises that help us stabilize this unshakability. There is never any guarantee, and we can be temporarily shaken by an event, but what is important is how quickly we recover. You see, most people, some people, they have a breakup in their life, and then they are miserable for 50 years thereafter, up until they die, because of a breakup. Other people have a breakup, and they are miserable for one day, and then they recover. So it makes a big difference in terms of happiness. It seems sometimes that one gets so drawn into experience that it's difficult to simply witness or to experience it just as a series of sensations. We have to be careful here. It's not to misunderstand sometimes the teachings as, in order not to suffer, I have to simply witness the bodily sensations. That would be a misuse of the tools that are given in the teachings. The tools that are given in the teachings are not band-aids that we can apply whenever it hurts. That's a misuse of the tools. The tools in the teaching have to be used in those moments when we are available, when we are not hurting, when we have this genuine interest in the truth that manifests in us, so that we can investigate. And then whatever has been achieved, understood, experienced through this investigation is going to magically change the way we react to events. When the event happens, it's too late to investigate. Ezra says, it was so good to see you and to be with friends last month. So wonderful to be able to continue remotely. It's not the same, of course, but still wonderful. Well, much love, Ezra. I hope the weather is nice where you are. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's in Seattle. Stephen, I recall reading in one of your books your description of your hearing a friend sing a spiritual song and you being struck by the beauty of the moment and being taken by a profound transformation or awakening. Would you please recount this experience and attempt to express your change in perspective and identity? Well, we had it was in the beginning of having met my teacher for perhaps 2 weeks. And there was this friend, Ivan, who was had been a student of my teacher and for a few years, and he was teaching the yoga that my teacher was teaching, and I had asked him to teach me this yoga. So there was this session at my place. There were 3 of us, my companion at the time and this friend. And at the end of the meditation, more than yoga for those who don't know this yoga, out of the blue he sang the Gayatri mantra. And I was drawn by the beauty of it. There was a great beauty but at the same time, I felt that there was some kind of a veil, an invisible veil, that was separating me from the beauty and preventing me from total immersion in the beauty, so to speak. And instead of trying to jump above this barrier, I decided to look at it, to let it present itself. And what came up was a fear. And this fear grew and grew and grew, and it became a huge panic. It was like my death was imminent if I would keep welcoming this thing. And then I remember that I thought, well, who cares, about the death? I was very committed to that search. And so I decided, okay, let the chips fall where they may, let's go for it. And as soon as I did that, as I completely allowed for this, whatever was going to happen to kill me, I could see a transformation of the structure of the fear. I could see it was a little bit like a tree with on top you have the branches, that's where all the thoughts of fear, and on the bottom you have the roots, and that's all the feeling, all the bodily sensation of fear. And there was like a unique trunk, and what I was witnessing is like all that which was above and below was disappearing, so that only this one thing was remaining, and that was me, the I, the separate I. And it was like a flame of a candle that was, running out of fuel. And then it vanished. And beyond there was only me, but only splendor, immortality, and absolute happiness. something that I could never have foreseen, because usually when I thought of happiness, there was always a scale. In other words, this type of experience it's like a rating movie, would bring happiness, would be an 8, and this one would be a 6, and this one would be 10 was the maximum. But there was always a possibility to encounter an 11 down the road. But this one was infinite, absolute. There was nothing beyond. So that was a surprise. But the great revelation, of course, was that I was not the flame that was vacillating and disappearing. That was why I was the immensity behind. And that up until that moment was frightening, the silence of this infinite space. Spaces frightened me no more. Then after that, I could see that the friend was an innocent tool and didn't know what had happened. He had been an innocent conveyor of the truth. But I remember there was a pain in my shoulder, because I remained in the same position for some times after that. And the world looked different, more vivid. There were apples in a basket. And I could look at them and see the beauty, a little bit as if I had smoked a big, a big thing, and then you go and you see the beauty of the red and the greens and the yellow, and all the shape of the apple. But that was without a joint, so it was also without this background of heaviness that I had whenever I would smoke some pot. So that was the description of the experience you refer to, which I usually don't describe, because although for me it was of paramount importance in this case, on this journey, different truth seekers walk on different paths and encounter different events. In hindsight, I can understand that the same truth can be arrived at, or the same happiness, or the same peace, without necessarily going through the same. And perhaps also that, and certainly that the meeting with my teachers, the first meeting, or perhaps I had 2 meetings, I don't remember, had an impact by introducing me to this listening to presence. But this experience was a revelation of the full reality, eternity, splendor, and happiness of this presence. That is in French, entitled On Divine Presence. The thought of God appears. Joy and peace appear too. Of course, not of an external God, but divine presence. However, I'm under the impression that my trust in this presence is not solidly anchored and vanishes to be replaced by emptiness. I feel guilty because of this lack of faith in divine presence. And I run in circles. And it is only through a teaching like tonight, during and after a yoga session, or when my heart spontaneously welcomes the thought of God, that everything feels in the right place. And therefore, and as a result, there is this feeling to be always missing the mark, and guilty of not doing what is required to develop the trust in divine presence. What should I do if there is anything to do? What you should not do is to feel guilty. You should instead congratulate yourself to have this desire to develop the trust. Don't stay within an attitude of trust but verify. Don't replace, there is a distinction to be made between faith, which is based on experience, and belief, which is based on nothing. Trust has to be based on experience. So how to develop trust? Through conducting experiments. That's the answer. In other words, trust the presence, the divine presence in you. Be open to the possibility that the presence which is hearing these words is divine, and check it out. For instance, if this presence which is hearing these words is divine in you, it is also divine in others. It is the same presence. So when you interact with others as an experiment. From this hypothesis, also, if this presence in you is divine presence, it is the same presence that creates the events in the world. So, when you interact or react to events in the world, react with them from this new hypothesis that they come from you, from this divine presence. In other words, that the world is not your enemy, but rather your friend, that the world is your world. that you are in your world like a fish in his water. That this universe is your universe, is the divine universe, that you are not separate, that you belong. And you'll see that the universe will confirm that you belong. You know, there is a story that the Buddha, after his enlightenment and the Bodhi tree, wanted to check it. You know, he called Mara, right, to the rescue to give him the proof, and somehow he got the proof. You can do that. It's better to check an enlightenment that possibly hasn't happened, than not to check an enlightenment that has happened. To check meaning conducting experiment. Because if you don't conduct experiments on an enlightenment that has happened, your enlightenment remains barren, sterile. If you try to check an enlightenment that has not happened, the answer to your question will be enlightening. Okay, last question. Christian. He sent a message that I must have answered already, but there was no sound. He asked me to answer it again. Oh. Might answer a question. And regarding the other question about Thanksgiving, I have to advise with before I give you an answer. Okay. Any questions left here? Thank you.